So I've got a question for you. How many of you have someone in your life that you watch make decisions that have terrible consequences? And hang on. And you think, man, if they would have just thought that through, they wouldn't be in the pain that they are in, and they would not have caused the pain that they have caused. Now, don't elbow the person next to you, but do you know anybody in your life like that? Okay, that's almost all of us. Next question. How many of you are that person? Yeah. I mean, we make these decisions and we think, what was I thinking? You know, if I had just thought this through, I wouldn't be where I am. So, how do we get ahead of the curve in life? Right? How do we learn things in our teens and our 20s? And maybe even our early 30s, so that we don't have regrets in our 40s and 50s and 60s. Adult pedagogy, the study of how adults learn, tells us that adults don't learn like children learn. Adults tend to only learn in crisis. Of course, the problem with learning in crisis is the crisis has happened before the learning should have taken place. And when that happens, often we say things like, you know, how did I get here? Why did this happen to me? And we have this passive language, kind of even victim language, you know. How could I have known this was going to happen? Well, newsflash, everybody else knew. We've all been there. And there are times in my life when I have thought, I just know that I should have known. And then when I reflect back on what happened in my life, I realized that I actually did know, but I just didn't apply what I already knew. We all know that life is not simple. We are faced with decisions that are not black and white. Life is lived in gray tones, isn't it? In every arena of life, be it our careers, our relationships, our families, we are constantly having to make judgment calls. And we can get tired. We can have decision fatigue. Wouldn't it be awesome if there was an app on your phone that you could just type in the scenario that you're in and bing, here would be the solution? Wouldn't that be great? Well, you know what? We kind of have that. It's called the Proverbs in our Bible. See, the Proverbs are intended to help us think through the gray areas and give us wisdom that will help us to navigate life so that we have a better life. Proverbs is kind of like the Twitter of the Bible. Just these little tweets, sometimes not even 140 characters, that you read this and you think, oh my gosh, if I did this, I would be like a wise person. And my life would just be better. How many of you are familiar with the term life hacks? Okay, I was not. That shows kind of how out of touch I am. So the staff was together and we were talking about, what are we going to study this summer? And we were talking about doing the book of Proverbs, and we're thinking about different themes. And so what would be a great title for this series? And Dayla comes up with the term. She says, well, what about life hacks? And I think everybody else around the table knew what it was. And I said, well, what's that? Well, if you're still a little in the dark, here is how that veritable compendium of information, Wikipedia, describes or defines life hack. A life hack is any trick, shortcut, skill, or novelty method that increases productivity and efficiency in all walks of life. Now, I'm all for productivity and efficiency, but what about just plain better? Are there life hacks that can make life better? Well, as it turns out, there are. The book of Proverbs. So from now until Labor Day, we are going to mine the Proverbs for these life hacks that will help us live a better life. And these things have been around for centuries. And as an introduction to the series, I want to read from Proverbs chapter 4. This is verses 1 through 9, and this is from the Message. Listen, friends, to some fatherly advice. Sit up and take notice so that you'll know how to live. I'm giving you good counsel. Don't let it go in one ear and out the other. When I was a boy at my father's knee, the pride and joy of my mother, he would sit me down and drill me. Take this to heart. Do what I tell you. Live. Sell everything and buy wisdom. Forage for understanding. Don't forget one word. Don't deviate an inch. Never walk away from wisdom. She guards your life. Love her. She keeps her eye on you. Above all and before all, do this. Get wisdom. Write this at the top of your list. Get understanding. Throw your arms around her. Believe me, you won't regret it. Never let her go. She will make your life glorious. She'll garland your life with grace. She'll festoon your days with beauty. What Solomon is telling his son is that wisdom is the key to a full and abundant life. Now, this is cliche, but I'm sure most of us have heard wisdom comes from experience. Have you heard that? While that may be true, it doesn't have to be true. I've had parents in my office over the years who are watching their children make some terrible choices. And they come in and they sit and they lament. And then one of them, usually the father, because this is how guys think, they say, well, I guess he or she will just have to learn from her or his mistakes. Okay, while they might learn from their mistakes, do they have to make mistakes to learn? Do we have to make mistakes to learn? You see, parents, you don't have to screw up on your first kid in order to get the second kid right. Singles, you don't have to go through a bunch of bad relationships before you find one that works. Couples, we don't have to fail at one or two marriages before we do one right. You see, we can gain wisdom by searching and learning what is true and what is right and applying it to our lives, and it will make life better. David said to Solomon, and Solomon says to his son, though it may cost you all you have, you can get wisdom. Now, so much of what we see in society around us is about what we can gain, what we can get, what we can accumulate. But what the scriptures are inviting us to is a treasure that no one can take away from you. What the scriptures are inviting us to is something that we can have where no one can take the wisdom that you have in your soul. So what we're going to do for the next 2.5 months is we're going to go through the Proverbs, and we are going to look at the life hacks that Solomon gives us. We're going to look at, next week we're going to look at fear, and then we're going to look at friendship, and then we're going to look at teachability and these things that are up there. And when we, this week, at some point this week, we will have posted on the website the dates beside each of the topics so that you can look at it and you can, see when we're going to talk about something. And there may be somebody in your life, say, that's needs to hear the one on tact, for instance. And you may say, hey, we're doing this interesting series, and you don't want to miss August 25th, So are you on board with this? Okay. And by the way, if you are visiting this morning and you're not real sure about this Jesus stuff or this God stuff or this Bible stuff, let me just say this. The things that we're going to talk about throughout the summer, whether you believe in God or not, if you apply this stuff to your life will be better. It just will. So this is good news for all of us, whether we are people of faith or not. So all of that is preamble to the sermon I'm going to preach today. What time is it? The Cowboys aren't playing. It's not football season. Now, before we jump into our first topic, I want to do something that we haven't done in a while. I'd like everybody to stand. I want you to find somebody close to you that's unfamiliar to you. You maybe don't know them at all. Maybe you don't know them well. And if you don't know them at all, just find one or two people and go, and I want you to do this. I want you to introduce yourself. Hi, I'm Keith. How long have you been at Lake Highlands Church? I've been here for about 1.5 years. You may have been here for 25 years. You may have been here for 25 minutes. How long have you been here? And then I want you to share 2 things that you protect. 2 things that you do all you can to secure. All right? Just 2 things. Find a person, introduce yourself, share 2 things. Just 2 things. You have 1 minute. Go. 1 minute. Thirty seconds. Fifteen seconds. Time. Okay, that's your minute. It was not that complicated. All right. Let's regroup. I know. All right, so somebody throw out, what do you protect? Children, marriage, Family? Money? Heart. How many of you have more than one lock on the door of your home? How many of you have passwords that are 10 characters long with caps and numbers and symbols? We protect all kinds of things and have security measures in place to protect stuff, and that's all good. But what does the book of wisdom say that we are to protect above all things? Our heart. Our heart. Proverbs 4:23 says this, above all else, guard your heart, for it is the wellspring of life. Meaning everything that you do flows from your heart. Now, when we talk about heart in our culture, we generally are thinking of our emotions, our affections, our feelings. And so when we talk about guarding our heart, we're protecting our hearts from having our feelings hurt, our emotions hurt. But how the Bible uses heart is the core of your being. It's not just your emotions and your affections, but it is your moral center. It is your spiritual center. It is what makes you, you. It is the core of who you are. The heart is mentioned over 900 times in the Bible, and it's talking about the essence of who we are. To guard something means to keep safe from harm or danger, protect, watch over, to keep under close watch. And the Hebrew word for guard means to guard with all vigilance. As this chapter in Proverbs opens, the father is talking to his son and he says, listen to my instruction. He's saying, son, I've been around for a while and this is how life works. What's really important in life is that above everything else, above your home, above your computer, above your bank accounts, yes, and even above your family or your marriage, you have to guard your heart, because everything you do, everything you are, flows from that. The exhortation is, make the condition of your heart more important than every other concern. In practical terms, what this means is that from time to time, you might have to give less attention to some other good things, like family or job or exercise or church or yes, even home repair. You might have to put some things on the back burner, but you cannot neglect taking care of your heart and keeping your heart. Solomon says, with all vigilance, more than anything else, you've got to keep this, you've got to secure this, you've got to guard this. My wife is terrific at this. Me, not so much. She's terrific at this. She has things in her routine that help her to guard her heart. When we were living in New York City and our kids were still at home, about once a month, Deanne would come to me and she would say, I need some time. And so she would, on Thursday morning, she would book a Priceline hotel that is within about an hour of the city. And on Thursday morning, she would drop the kids off at school, and then she would leave town. And so I would be on with the kids from when they got home from school on Thursday afternoon until she got home on Friday evening. And she would have 24 to 36 hours where she would take her journal and she would take her Bible and she would just spend time alone with the Lord, because she needed to guard her heart. And there's so much that just grabs us and pulls us and gets us to a place. In the 1600s, there was a Puritan writer by the name of John Flavel, and he wrote about this verse. In fact, he wrote over 100 pages about Proverbs 4:23 because, well, that's just what Puritans do. And in writing on Proverbs 4:23, he said, our hearts are like a musical instrument. You tune it, you've got it just right, and then you hang it on the wall for a few days, and it goes out of tune. And you know that with your guitar. Or you tune it, and you've got it just right, and then somebody will bump into it, and it goes out of tune. He said our hearts are like that. They can be right with God, and then something disrupts them, or we neglect them, and they get out of tune. We've all had that experience, haven't we? I have this prayer on my desk that's been there for years. It's on one of the, pull-out things that you can write on, and I pull it out and look at it several times a week. And it says, Lord, so far today, God, I've done all right. I haven't lost my temper. I haven't been greedy or grumpy or nasty or selfish or overindulgent. And Lord, I'm grateful for that. But in a few minutes, God, I'm going to get out of bed. And for the rest of the day, I'm going to need some help. That's us, isn't it? Our day starts out well, but then we get into the office and the project isn't going quite the way we want, and our instrument gets out of tune. Or we, run into that person that just rubs us the wrong way, and our instrument gets out of tune. Or we have that conversation with our spouse that is not encouraging, and our instrument gets out of tune. Our hearts can so easily get out of tune. So what does it mean to guard your heart? To guard it above all things. It means that you pay attention to what's going on in the deepest core of what's inside of you. And why should you do that? Because it is the wellspring. The picture is that there's this spring of water that is constantly flowing, and everything's coming out of this. And what's coming out of this is the product of your heart. Jesus says the same thing. We want to stop stuff. We want behavioral change. Well, Jesus says everything flows from our heart. In Matthew 5:28, Jesus says, I tell you that anyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart. Jesus says, if you have a lust problem, you have a heart problem. In Matthew 6:21, he says, where your treasure is, that's where your heart is. If you have a debt problem, a spending problem, a accumulation problem, an upgrade problem, a materialism problem, you have a heart problem. In Luke 6:45, he says, a good man brings good things out of the good stored up in his heart, and an evil man brings evil things out of the evil stored up in his heart. For the mouth speaks what the heart is full of. Someone cuts you off in traffic, and what comes out of your mouth? Praise Jesus. Your boss belittles you. Your spouse disrespects you. And what comes out of your mouth? You see, Jesus says that if you have a tongue problem, you have a heart problem. Jesus said in Mark 7:21, for it is from within, out of a person's heart, that evil thoughts come. Sexual immorality, theft, murder, adultery, greed, malice, deceit, lewdness, envy, slander, arrogance, and folly. All of these evils come from inside and defile a person. What Jesus is saying is, if you've got behavioral issues, what it boils down to is you have a heart problem. Why do people do wrong things? Hurtful things, evil things? Because they haven't guarded their heart above all else, and they've allowed things to come in and pollute their heart. And when your heart gets polluted, what comes out of you is harmful to you, and it's harmful to other people. Some of you may have read or heard the recent news of a pastor of a megachurch who was forced to resign because of alleged inappropriate behavior with women. I'm not going to comment on whether I think it's true or false. I don't know, but what I know is because of the allegations, and there was enough credibility to the allegations that he had to resign, it brought great damage to his church, great damage to the organization that he led. I would assume great damage to his marriage and his family, and certainly damage to the reputation of the gospel and the reputation of Jesus. What I know is that those things that were alleged, even if they were misconstrued, what I know is that those things didn't happen overnight. Those things happen when you go weeks or months or maybe years without guarding your heart. Because only if you guard your heart above all else and make sure that good stuff is going in, will it keep bad stuff from coming out. He didn't keep retuning the instrument. And the result was it had devastating impact on himself and others. He had a heart problem. Too often we try to address the issues in our lives with behavioral modification, and our culture is big on behavior modification. And it's not bad to do that, but it doesn't change our heart. It just rearranges the flesh. And what happens when we rearrange the flesh is it turns into either pride or despair. I mean, think about it. You look in the mirror and, you turn sideways and go, "Ooh, that's not looking very good." And so you commit to dieting. And you go on this diet and you start watching what you eat and all that stuff. One of two things is going to happen, generally speaking. Either you're going to have success, you're going to lose weight, and you're going to say, "Oh, I'm looking pretty good." And then you're going to start looking at other people and going, "Oh, Steve could use to lose a few pounds." There's going to be a little pride that creeps in, because you're feeling good about you. Or you're going to look in the mirror a few weeks later and that paunch is still going to be there, and you're going to get depressed. And you're going to, I can't change. I can't do this. And it leads to despair. We can work on behaviors, but if that's all we do, in the end, it doesn't bring about life change. What we really have to do is ask ourselves, what's going on in our heart? Behaviors only point to what's going on inside. It's the quality of your inward moral and spiritual life that is driving your actions and impacting others around you, because from the heart flows everything that we do. So let's get to the question of how we guard our hearts. We can know what's in our hearts by the behaviors that are coming out, but how do we guard them? And let me say right up front, it's very simple in its terms. There are only 2 steps, okay? Easy to remember, very hard to do. The first step in guarding your heart is we have to recognize our heart as the priority. You have to recognize your heart as the priority. Now, I've already talked about this, so I'm not going to beat this to death. But wisdom says we need to put our heart above all else. So here's a question. Where on your priority list do you place the health of your heart? I'm not talking about the physical health. I'm talking about the spiritual, moral health of your heart. When you look at your daily calendar, when you look at your weekly calendar, when you look at your monthly calendar, can you point to here, 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 and here is where my heart health is taking place? It needs to be top priority. So that's number 1. Step number 2, we have to be vigilant about what goes in. I read an article that analyzed some of the dieting trends affecting our culture. It showed that the Japanese eat little fat and suffer fewer heart problems than the Americans or the Brits. The French eat a lot of fat and suffer fewer heart problems than the U.S. or the Brits. It said the Italians drink a lot of red wine and have a lower risk of heart problems than the Americans or the Brits. And so the conclusion was, you can eat whatever you want, but speaking English will kill you. That has no point. I just thought it was funny. To be vigilant in guarding our heart is really about what goes in. If you struggle with lust, it's because you're feeding your heart with books or movies or internet sites that are polluting your heart. If you struggle with greed or materialism, it's because you're feeding your heart with images of more, upgrade, upgrade, upgrade. If you struggle with anger, it's because you're feeding your heart with desires of control or the propensity to want to be right. Whatever is going in is fueling your heart, so we need to be fueling our heart with good things. In verse 1, Solomon says, "Listen to my instruction. Pay attention and gain understanding." In verse 20, he says, "Pay attention to what I say. Listen closely to my words." This emphasis to give careful attention to divine truth is followed by the promise of life and health and being prosperous. You see, we need truth. Jesus said, if you know the truth will set you free. Solomon exhorts his son to discern and hold the instruction close to heart. Friends, we live in a world that is often opposed to truth. Our culture promotes tolerance over truth, but wisdom reminds us that there's a difference between right and wrong, good and bad, righteousness and evil. And Solomon says that level paths that have a solid foundation lead to success, but evil and unstable choices will lead to destruction. Guarding your heart means that you make your heart first the top priority, and you are vigilant about what goes in. It means you energize your life with the transforming truth of God's love and God's word. It means that we pay close attention and listen closely to what the creator of life has said about life, because he knows how life works best. Over the next 8 weeks, we're going to be looking at these life hacks that will make our lives better. And the life hack we have to start with is the word guard. Guard your heart. Because if we don't guard our hearts, everything else we do is just behavior modification. It's all about rearranging the flesh, and that may work for a while, but it won't last. It's only when we prioritize our hearts and become vigilant about what goes in that true transformation happens. And then what flows out will be a blessing to other people. And I guarantee you it will make your life better. Let me pray for us. Jesus, we thank you that you have given us a book of life hacks. We're grateful that we don't have to fly blindly through life, that we don't have to make a mess of our lives before we get it right. Lord, I pray that we would all be learners, and that we would be desirous of learning before we make this mistake, learning before we're in the crisis, so that we don't wind up in the crisis. Lord, may we heed Solomon's words to his son, that we would seek after wisdom above everything else. We pray this for your name's sake. Amen. Please stand up, please. As we go out today, there will be folks down front who would love to pray with you if you are in need of anything this morning. We had a glorious time of praise and prayer last night, and I'm sorry that many of you couldn't be with us, but those of us who were here, it was just a real blessing. And so I think the next one is scheduled for September, maybe, kind of ish. So we'll make sure you know about that, and hope you can join us next time. Is our projector out? Do we have a send out verse? There we go. As we go out this morning, let's read this verse together. Above all else, guard your heart, for it is the wellspring of life. We're dismissed.